she thought she was setting him up for the ultimate humiliation. A black waiter invited to mock at her elite charity gala in front of her snobby friends. But when Lila Whitmore watched Marcus Reed command that ballroom with quiet dignity, deflecting cruelty, and protecting the vulnerable, she realized she was the one about to be exposed. One stolen photograph would ignite a social media firestorm that threatened to destroy his career and her reputation, forcing two people from opposite worlds to choose between the safety of silence and the dangerous truth of what was growing between them. Little did they know that her so-called best friend had been orchestrating their downfall from the very beginning, and the real shock was yet to come. What started as a cruel dare would become a test of whether love could survive betrayal, family pressure, and the unforgiving spotlight of high society gossip. If you're watching this story unfold, hit that subscribe button and tell me where you're watching from. I want to know if you believe second chances can lead to true love. The Saturday morning sun streamed through the windows of Café Marina, casting golden light across the white tablecloths and sparkling water glasses. Lila Whitmore sat at her usual corner table, stabbing at her fruit salad with more force than necessary. The cafe buzzed with the quiet chatter of weekend brunch, but all she could hear was the hollow echo in her chest. "You look like someone stole your yacht," Vivian Hale said, sliding into the seat across from her. Vivian's perfectly straightened blonde hair caught the light as she leaned forward, eyes bright with mischief. Lila forced a smile. "Just tired. The charity board meeting ran late last night." Vivian waved for the waiter, then turned back to Lila with that familiar gleam in her eyes. "Speaking of charity, did you see that waiter last night at Romano's? The tall one with the gorgeous brown skin?" Lila's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "What about him?" "He was so proper, all yes ma'am, and certainly miss when he served our table." Vivian laughed, the sound sharp in the morning air. "I bet he thinks he's something special. Probably saving up for community college or something." The fruit felt like cardboard in Lila's mouth. She knew she should change the subject, but the loneliness that had been eating at her for months made her desperate for Vivian's attention. Even this kind. "He seemed nice enough," Lila said carefully. "Nice? Please?" Vivian rolled her eyes. "You know what would be hilarious? If you invited him to your gala on Thursday, can you imagine? Him trying to make small talk with your mother's crowd?" Lila's stomach dropped. That's cruel, Viv." "Oh, come on. It's not like he'd get hurt. He'd probably love the free food and champagne. And think of the stories we'd have afterward." Vivian's grin widened. "I dare you." The word hung between them like a challenge. Lila stared at her friend, seeing something cold in her eyes that she'd never noticed before. Or maybe she had noticed, but ignored it because being alone felt worse. "I'm not going to humiliate someone for your entertainment," Lila said quietly. "Who said anything about humiliation? You'd be giving him a chance to see how the other half lives. Think of it as community outreach." Vivian's voice dripped with fake sweetness. "Unless you're too scared." There it was, the hook that always caught Lila. Too scared. Too proper. Too boring. The same words that had followed her through prep school, through college, through every social event where she smiled and nodded and felt invisible. Her phone sat on the table between them, screen dark and waiting. "Fine," Lila heard herself say. "But not to mock him. If I'm going to invite him, I'll do it properly." Vivian clapped her hands together. "This is going to be amazing. Do it now before you chicken out." Lila picked up her phone with trembling fingers. She found Romano's number from last night's reservation confirmation and typed carefully. "Hello, this is Lila Whitmore. You waited on our table last night. I'm hosting a charity gala this Thursday evening at my family's estate in the Hamptons. Would you like to attend as my guest?" She stared at the words for a long moment. Her thumb hovered over the send button. "Well?" Vivian prompted. Lila pressed send before she could change her mind. The message whooshed away into the digital void, carrying with it a piece of her conscience. "Message sent," she whispered, watching the screen confirm delivery. Vivian squealed with delight, but the sound felt distant. Lila's smile faded as she realized what she'd just done. She'd taken Vivian's dare and dressed it up as kindness, but underneath, she knew the truth. She was using someone else's dignity as entertainment. The fruit salad sat forgotten as guilt settled heavy in her stomach. 2 hours later, Lila found herself pulling into the parking lot of Romano's. The restaurant looked different in the afternoon light, smaller, more ordinary than it had the night before. She sat in her silver BMW, hands gripping the steering wheel, wondering what she was doing. Her phone had stayed silent since sending the text. Maybe he wouldn't respond. Maybe she could pretend it never happened. But as she sat there, she knew she couldn't leave it hanging in the air. If she was going to do this thing, this terrible, impulsive thing, she needed to do it face to face. She owed him that much. The restaurant's front door chimed as she entered. The lunch crowd was thin, just a few tables of couples sharing pasta and quiet conversation. Behind the bar, she could see staff prepping for the dinner rush, polishing glasses, folding napkins, arranging flowers. "Can I help you?" A young woman with short dark hair approached from behind the host stand. "I'm looking for—" Lila realized she didn't even know his name. Heat crept up her neck. "The waiter who worked last night? Tall, African-American, very professional?" "Marcus? He's in the back. Let me get him." Marcus. Of course he had a name. Of course he was a real person with a real life, not just a prop for Vivian's amusement. A few minutes later, he emerged from the kitchen area, wiping his hands on a white towel. He was exactly as she remembered, tall and lean, with kind brown eyes and an air of quiet confidence. He wore black slacks and a crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms. "Miss Whitmore," he said, his voice warm but cautious. "I got your message. Please, call me Lila." She tucked a strand of blonde hair behind her ear, suddenly aware of how overdressed she was in her designer sundress and pearls. "I wanted to speak with you in person." He nodded toward an empty table near the window. They sat across from each other, the afternoon sun casting patterns on the white tablecloth between them. "About Thursday," Lila began, then stopped. How could she explain this without revealing the dare? Without admitting that her first instinct had been cruelty? "It's a charity gala," she continued, "for the Children's Hospital. Nothing too fancy. Dinner, dancing, some speeches." Each word felt like a small lie. It would be very fancy, the kind of event where a single plate cost more than most people spent on groceries in a month. Marcus leaned back slightly, studying her face. "And you want me there because—" The question hung between them, simple and direct. Lila felt her cheeks burn. "Because my friend dared me. Because I'm lonely and stupid and thought it might be funny. Because I wanted to fit in with someone who doesn't even like me very much. Because you were kind last night," she said instead. "When that man at table 6 was rude to the busboy, you handled it perfectly. You didn't make a scene, but you protected him. I appreciated that." It was true, she realized. She had noticed. While Vivian and their other friends had been gossiping about people across the room, Lila had watched Marcus quietly redirect a drunk customer who was berating a young server. He'd done it with such grace that the customer never even realized he'd been managed. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes searching her face. This isn't some kind of joke, is it? You and your friends having a laugh? The question hit like a physical blow. Lila's mouth went dry. He knew. Somehow he could see right through her. No, she said, the word coming out as barely a whisper. Then louder. No, it's not a joke. I wouldn't do that. But even as she said it, she knew it was exactly what she had been about to do. What she might still be doing, despite her good intentions now. Marcus nodded slowly. Okay, then yes, I'll come. You will? Lila blinked in surprise. I've never been to a charity gala, he admitted with a small smile. Sounds like something I should experience at least once. Relief flooded through her, followed immediately by panic. He was actually going to come. To her mother's event, full of people who would look at him the way Vivian had, like an amusing novelty. What had she done? It starts at 7, she managed. The address is... I'll find it, Marcus said, standing from the table. Thank you for the invitation, Lila. She watched him walk back toward the kitchen, his stride confident and easy. At the doorway, he turned back. Just so we're clear, he said quietly. I don't need anyone's charity, and I don't perform for anyone's entertainment. The words were said without anger, but they hit their mark. Lila sat alone at the table for a long time after he disappeared, staring out at the parking lot and wondering if it was too late to take it all back. That evening, Lila sat in her father's study, surrounded by guest lists and seating charts for Thursday's event. Henry Whitmore dozed in his favorite leather recliner, a soft blanket tucked around his legs. He'd been recovering from heart surgery for 3 months now, and the exhaustion still caught up with him at unexpected moments. Lila tried to focus on the arrangements, but her mind kept drifting to the afternoon. To Marcus's steady gaze and the quiet warning in his voice. To the way Vivian had laughed when she'd called to tell her the plan was in motion. Working late again? Her mother's voice cut through the silence like a blade. Eleanor Whitmore stood in the doorway, perfectly put together even at 8 in the evening. Her silver hair was swept into an elegant chignon, and she wore a cream silk blouse that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Just finalizing the seating chart? Lila said, not looking up from the papers spread across the mahogany desk. Eleanor moved into the room with the kind of grace that came from decades of practice. She glanced at the guest list, her sharp blue eyes scanning the names with practiced efficiency. I see we have everyone who matters, she said with satisfaction. The Pemberton table should generate significant donations, and placing the hospital board near the stage was wise. Mother, I've invited a guest, a +1. The words tumbled out before Lila could stop them. Eleanor's eyebrows rose slightly. Oh? Anyone I know? Marcus Reed. He's... Lila struggled for words. He works in hospitality. It wasn't technically a lie. Waiting tables was hospitality work. But she could see her mother's mental calculations, the way Eleanor's expression shifted as she processed this information. How lovely, Eleanor said, her tone suggesting it was anything but. I assume he's someone special? Heat crept up Lila's neck. He's a friend. Of course. Eleanor's smile was sharp as crystal. Well, I trust you know what you're doing. This event reflects on our family, after all. The weight of expectation settled on Lila's shoulders like a familiar burden. Everything always reflected on the family. Every choice, every friend, every moment of her life was viewed through the lens of what it meant for the Whitmore name. Henry stirred in his chair, blinking awake slowly. What are we reflecting on? He asked, his voice still fuzzy with sleep. Lila's invited a young man to Thursday's gala? Eleanor said, smoothing an invisible wrinkle from her blouse. Henry's face brightened. That's wonderful, sweetheart. It'll be nice for you to have company. The simple kindness in his voice made Lila's throat tight. Her father had always been the soft place in their hard-edged world. Even now, weakened by surgery and medication, he saw the best in everything. We should add him to the seating chart, Henry continued. Put him at our table. I'd like to meet him. Dad, you don't have to. Nonsense. If he's important enough for you to invite, he's important enough to sit with family. Eleanor's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Henry, perhaps we should discuss the arrangements privately. What's to discuss? Henry's tone remained mild, but there was steel underneath. It's Lila's event, her guest, her choice. Lila stared down at the seating chart. Marcus's name a small addition in her careful handwriting. Such a little thing that seemed to carry so much weight. She thought about Vivian's dare, about the cruelty that had started this whole chain of events. But she also thought about Marcus's dignity, the way he'd protected that young server without making a show of it. Maybe this could be different than what Vivian had intended. Maybe it could be something real instead of something cruel. Or maybe she was just telling herself stories to feel better about a terrible mistake. Outside the study windows, the sun was setting over the manicured grounds of the estate. In 4 days, those same grounds would be full of people in evening wear, drinking champagne and writing checks for charity while they gossiped about everyone around them. And somewhere in that crowd would be Marcus Reed, trusting her invitation was genuine. Lila picked up her pen and carefully wrote his name at the family table, right next to her own. Whatever happened on Thursday, she wouldn't let him face it alone. The ink dried dark against the cream-colored paper, making it official. There was no going back now. Henry had drifted off to sleep again, his breathing deep and even. Eleanor stood by the window, looking out at the gathering darkness with an expression Lila couldn't read. I hope you know what you're doing, her mother said quietly, without turning around. So did Lila. So did she. Sunday morning dawned clear and bright, the kind of day that made the world feel full of possibilities. In his small apartment across town, Marcus Reed stood in his kitchen, making coffee, while his sister Nadia fed breakfast to her 4-year-old son at the little table by the window. Uncle Marcus, can we go to the park today? Jalen asked through a mouthful of cereal. After I get back from the grocery store, Marcus promised, ruffling the boy's curly hair. But you have to finish your breakfast first. Nadia looked up from her nursing journal, which was spread across half the table. She worked the night shift at the hospital and was always studying for one certification or another. At 33, she was 3 years older than Marcus, but the responsibilities they'd shared since their parents died had aged them both beyond their years. You're in a good mood, she observed, watching him hum while he waited for the coffee to brew. Can't a man be in a good mood on a Sunday morning? Sure, but you're never in a good mood before coffee. She set down her pen and studied his face. What's going on? Marcus poured himself a mug and leaned against the counter. The kitchen was small but clean, with white cabinets and blue-checkered curtains that Nadia had made herself. It didn't have the granite countertops or stainless steel appliances of the houses he catered, but it was home. I got invited to something, he said finally. A charity gala. Thursday night? Nadia's eyebrows rose. By who? A customer from the restaurant, Lila Whitmore. He said the name carefully, watching for his sister's reaction. Whitmore? Like the Whitmore Foundation? The hospital wing that's named after them? Probably. She mentioned it was for the children's hospital. Nadia leaned back in her chair, processing this information. She was the cautious one, always looking for the catch. It had served them well over the years, especially after their parents' accident when Marcus was 22 and she was 25, suddenly responsible for raising her infant son alone. "And you said yes?" I said yes. "Marcus." Her voice carried that note of warning he knew well. "Rich white girls don't usually invite black waiters to charity galas unless they want something. What does she want?" The question he'd been avoiding all weekend hung in the air between them. What did Lila Whitmore want? She'd seemed genuinely apologetic about something during their conversation, though he wasn't sure what. And there had been something sad in her eyes, a loneliness he recognized because he'd seen it in his own mirror. "Maybe she just wants company," he said. "Maybe." Nadia didn't sound convinced. "Or maybe she wants to feel good about herself by showing off how progressive she is. Look at me, bringing my charity case to the fancy party." The words stung because Marcus had wondered the same thing. But something about Lila's nervousness, the way she'd insisted on meeting in person, made him think there was more to it. "I can handle myself," he said quietly. "I know you can. That's not what I'm worried about." Nadia reached over and squeezed his hand. "I'm worried about your heart. You're too good, Marcus. You see the best in people even when they don't deserve it." It was an old argument between them. Nadia saw the world as a place where you had to fight for everything you got, where kindness was often a luxury they couldn't afford. Marcus believed that kindness was the only thing that made the fight worthwhile. "Maybe this time I'm right about someone," he said, "and maybe this time you'll get hurt." She sighed, then stood to clear Jalen's empty bowl. "But I know that look. You've already decided." "I have some rules," Marcus said. "I'll go, I'll be polite, and I'll leave early. If anyone treats me like a pet project or a photo opportunity, I'm gone." "Good rules." Nadia kissed his cheek as she passed. "Just be careful, okay? And if this girl hurts you, she'll have to deal with me." Marcus grinned. At barely 5'4", Nadia looked harmless. But she'd once stared down a landlord who tried to raise their rent illegally, and the man had backed down without another word. "Yes, ma'am," he said. After Nadia and Jalen left for the park, Marcus stood in front of his closet, looking at his options. He didn't own a tuxedo, had never needed one, but he had a good navy suit that he'd bought for job interviews and a white dress shirt that Nadia had given him for Christmas. He pulled them out and hung them carefully on the closet door. The suit was simple, but well cut, and it fit him properly. He would look respectable, even if he wouldn't look wealthy. As he ironed the shirt, Marcus thought about Lila Whitmore's face across the restaurant table. There had been something fragile about her, despite her obvious privilege. Something that reminded him of the foster kids he'd volunteered with at the community center. Children who had everything they needed except someone who truly saw them. Maybe that was what she wanted. Not a charity case or a statement, but someone who would see her as more than just her family name and her trust fund. Or maybe Nadia was right, and he was being naive. Either way, Thursday would tell the tale. Marcus finished ironing and hung the shirt next to the suit. Whatever Lila Whitmore's motives, he would meet them with dignity. He would not be anyone's pity project, and he would not be anyone's entertainment. But maybe, if he was lucky, he might be someone's friend. The afternoon sun streamed through his bedroom window, warming the small space. In 4 days, he would walk into a world he'd only seen from the service side, and he would do it on his own terms. He was ready. Thursday evening arrived with the kind of golden light that made everything look like a painting. The Whitmore estate buzzed with activity as caterers, Florists and musicians transformed the sprawling grounds into an elegant wonderland. White tents dotted the manicured lawn, strung with thousands of tiny lights that would twinkle like stars once the sun set. Lila stood at her bedroom window, watching the preparations with a knot of anxiety in her stomach. She'd barely slept the night before, replaying every possible disaster that could unfold. What if Marcus felt out of place? What if her mother's friends were cruel? What if Vivian said something awful? What if this whole thing was the mistake she feared it was? A knock at her door interrupted her spiraling thoughts. "Come in," she called. Eleanor entered, resplendent in midnight blue silk, her jewelry glinting in the fading sunlight. "The photographer will be here soon for family portraits," she said. "Are you nearly ready?" Lila nodded toward her dress hanging on the closet door, a flowing emerald green gown that brought out her eyes. "Almost." "Good." Eleanor paused, studying her daughter's reflection in the mirror. "About your guest tonight." "Marcus," Lila said firmly. "His name is Marcus." "Yes, Marcus." Eleanor's tone was carefully neutral. "I've seated him at our table, as your father requested. I trust you've prepared him for what to expect?" The question carried weight. Prepared him for the stares, the whispers, the careful politeness that barely masked curiosity, or worse. Prepared him to be the only black face in a sea of old money white. "He's not naive, Mother. He knows what kind of event this is." "I'm sure he does." Eleanor smoothed an invisible wrinkle from her skirt. "I just want this evening to go smoothly for everyone involved." After her mother left, Lila stared at herself in the mirror. Her blonde hair was swept into an elegant updo, her makeup flawless. She looked like every other rich girl at every other charity event. But inside, she felt like she was about to step onto a stage without knowing her lines. Her phone buzzed with a text from Vivian. "Can't wait to meet your mystery man. This is going to be so interesting." Lila's stomach lurched. She'd been so focused on preparing herself that she'd barely thought about how Vivian might behave. Her friend had a talent for making cutting remarks sound like compliments, for finding someone's weakness and poking at it with a smile. Another text, this time from an unknown number. "Hi, this is Marcus. I'll be arriving at 7 as requested. Thank you again for the invitation." The simple politeness of the message somehow made everything worse. He was trusting her, coming to her world, her family's event, believing her invitation was genuine and kind. Lila typed back, "Looking forward to seeing you. I'll meet you at the front entrance." It was the least she could do. At exactly 7 o'clock, a modest Honda Civic pulled into the circular driveway behind a string of luxury cars. Lila stood near the entrance, greeting guests with practiced smiles, but her attention kept drifting to the parking area. When Marcus stepped out of his car, her breath caught. He looked magnificent in his navy suit, the color bringing out the warm undertones in his brown skin. His tie was perfectly knotted, his shoes polished to a shine. But more than his appearance, it was the way he carried himself that struck her. Confident without being arrogant, observant without seeming overwhelmed. He handed his keys to a valet with a quiet "thank you" and walked toward the entrance with steady steps. Several guests turned to look, conversations pausing mid-sentence as they tried to place this unfamiliar face. "Marcus!" Lila called out, moving to intercept him before anyone else could. "I'm so glad you're here." "Lila!" His smile was warm but cautious as he took in the scope of the event, the orchestra tuning up, the servers circulating with champagne, the hundreds of guests in glittering evening wear. "This is impressive." "Thank you. Come, let me introduce you to my father." She led him through the crowd, acutely aware of the eyes following them. Some faces showed simple curiosity, others barely concealed speculation. She caught sight of Vivian near the bar, watching their progress with undisguised interest. Henry Whitmore stood near the garden entrance, leaning lightly on a carved walking stick. Despite his recent surgery, he looked distinguished in his black tuxedo, his silver hair combed back and his eyes bright with genuine pleasure at seeing guests enjoy his family's hospitality. "Dad, I'd like you to meet Marcus Reed. Marcus, this is my father, Henry Whitmore." Henry extended his hand with a genuine smile. "Marcus, wonderful to meet you. Thank you for joining us tonight." "Thank you for having me, Mr. Whitmore. This is beautiful." Marcus gestured toward the gardens, where lights were beginning to twinkle in the growing dusk. "Eleanor and Lila do all the work. I just try to stay out of the way and recover properly." Henry's self-deprecating humor was exactly what was needed to ease the moment. "I understand you work in hospitality?" "I do. I'm head waiter and sommelier at Romano's downtown." "Ah, Romano's. Eleanor and I had our anniversary dinner there 2 years ago. Excellent wine selection." "Thank you, sir. The owner takes great pride in the cellar." Lila watched the easy exchange with relief. Her father had always been good with people, seeing them as individuals rather than representatives of their background or bank account. It was a gift that had served him well in business and made him beloved by everyone who worked for the family. A commotion near the entrance drew their attention. A slightly drunk guest was gesticulating wildly, while a young server tried to balance a tray of glasses around him. The server, barely 19 with nervous eyes, was clearly struggling to navigate the situation without causing offense. "Excuse me for a moment," Marcus said quietly, already moving toward the problem. Lila watched as he approached the scene with calm authority. He placed a gentle hand on the server's arm, guiding him safely out of the drunk guest's range while simultaneously redirecting the man's attention with a skillful comment about the gardens. "Why don't you enjoy the terrace, sir?" Marcus suggested smoothly. "The view of the water is spectacular from there." The drunk guest, suddenly focused on this new conversational partner, allowed himself to be steered away from the service area. The young server shot Marcus a grateful look before hurrying toward the kitchen with his tray intact. "Well," Henry murmured, "that was expertly handled." Lila felt something warm unfurl in her chest. Shame at her original motives, yes, but also something else. Admiration. Pride, even? Marcus hadn't hesitated to help someone who needed it, even though he was a guest at an event where he knew almost no one. The string quartet began playing a gentle waltz as guests moved toward the dinner tent. Eleanor appeared at Henry's elbow, elegant and composed as always. "Shall we go in?" she suggested. Her gaze flicked to Marcus, and Lila caught something that might have been approval in her mother's expression. The dinner tent was magnificent, draped in cream silk with cascading flowers and more tiny lights than Lila could count. Their table was near the front, close to where she would need to give her speech later in the evening. As they took their seats, she noticed how Marcus waited for Eleanor to sit first, how he held Lila's chair without making a show of it. The other guests at their table were family friends, people Lila had known since childhood. To her relief, they welcomed Marcus with genuine warmth, drawn in by his quiet confidence and thoughtful responses to their questions. "I've always wanted to learn about wine," admitted Mrs. Patterson, a family friend whose husband had made his fortune in real estate. "It seems so complicated." "It doesn't have to be," Marcus replied, his voice carrying the passion he felt for his craft. "The most important thing is to drink what you enjoy. Everything else is just details." As the evening progressed, Lila found herself relaxing for the first time in days. Marcus fit seamlessly into the conversation, neither trying too hard to impress nor shrinking into the background. He asked thoughtful questions about the charity work, shared stories that made people laugh, and listened with genuine interest when others spoke. But then she caught sight of Vivian across the room, phone in hand, angling for what looked suspiciously like a photo opportunity. "Would you like to get some air?" Lila asked Marcus as the main course was being cleared. "The terrace has a beautiful view." "That sounds perfect." They made their way outside, where Japanese lanterns cast warm pools of light across the stone terrace. The evening air was soft and sweet, carrying the scent of jasmine from the gardens below. Other guests wandered the space in small groups, their voices mixing with the distant sound of waves against the shore. "Your family seems lovely," Marcus said, leaning against the stone balustrade that overlooked the water. "They are." Lila joined him, grateful for the relative privacy. "My father especially. He's been my anchor through everything." "His recovery is going well?" "Better than we hoped. He's stubborn, which the doctors say is good for his prognosis." She smiled at the memory of Henry arguing with his physical therapist earlier that week. "He likes you." "I like him too." Marcus turned to study her face in the lantern light. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why did you really invite me tonight?" The question she'd been dreading hung between them like a challenge. Lila's hands tightened on the stone railing as she fought the urge to lie, to give him some comfortable fiction about expanding social circles or supporting diversity. "Because my friend dared me to," she said quietly, the words barely audible above the distant music. Marcus was silent for so long that Lila finally looked up to meet his eyes. His expression wasn't angry, exactly, but something had shifted. "I see," he said finally. "No, you don't." The words tumbled out in a rush. "Yes, that's how it started. Vivian saw you at the restaurant and said terrible things, and she dared me to invite you as some kind of joke. But that's not why I'm here with you now." "Then why are you here?" "Because when I came to the restaurant to invite you, I watched you handle that situation with grace and kindness. Because you protected someone who needed protection without making a big show of it. Because—" She took a shaky breath. "Because I've been surrounded by people who think cruelty is entertaining, and I forgot that there were still good people in the world." Marcus studied her face for a long moment. "And what happens now? Do I become your way of proving to yourself that you're not like your friend?" The question cut deep because there was truth in it. "I don't know," Lila admitted. "I just know that I'm sorry for the way this started, and I'm glad you're here." Before Marcus could respond, a camera flash lit up the terrace behind them. They turned to see Vivian lowering her phone with a satisfied smile. "Don't mind me," she called out brightly. "You two look so romantic in the lantern light. I couldn't resist." Lila's blood turned to ice. "Vivian, delete that." "Oh, don't be silly. It's a beautiful photo." Vivian's fingers were already moving across her screen. "Perfect for social media. Heiress and her mystery man at exclusive charity gala. The society pages will eat this up." "Delete the photo, Vivian." Marcus's voice was quiet, but carried unmistakable authority. Vivian looked up, surprised by the steel in his tone. For a moment, something flickered across her face. Uncertainty, maybe even fear. Then her smile returned, sharper than before. "I don't think so," she said. "Freedom of the press and all that." She turned and walked away, already typing captions. Lila started to follow, but Marcus caught her arm gently. "Let her go," he said. "But she's going to She's going to do what she was always planning to do. The only question is what we do now. They stood together on the terrace as the evening continued around them, both understanding that something had shifted. The careful boundary between public and private had been crossed, and there would be consequences neither of them could fully predict. In the distance, the orchestra was playing something soft and melancholy. The lanterns swayed gently in the ocean breeze, casting dancing shadows across the stone. "I should probably go," Marcus said finally. "Please don't. Not because of her." He turned to look at her, and in his eyes she saw not anger, but something sadder. Resignation, maybe. The look of someone who had expected better, but wasn't entirely surprised to be disappointed. "I won't be anyone's lesson, Lila, and I won't be anyone's entertainment." The words echoed what he'd said at the restaurant, but now they carried the weight of experience, of watching her friend turn their quiet conversation into a public spectacle without permission or conscience. "You're not!" Lila said desperately. "You're not either of those things." "Then what am I?" The question hung between them, unanswered and perhaps unanswerable. Because the truth was, Lila didn't know yet what Marcus was to her, or what she hoped he might become. She only knew that the thought of him leaving because of Vivian's cruelty made her feel hollow inside. "You're someone I want to know better," she said finally. "If you'll let me." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, looking out over the water where moonlight painted silver paths across the waves. "We'll see," he said eventually. "We'll see what tomorrow brings." It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no either. For now, it would have to be enough. As they stood together in the lantern light, neither of them noticed Vivian in the distance, her thumb hovering over the post button on her phone. Neither of them saw the satisfied smile that played across her lips as she pressed it. The photo went live at 11:47 p.m., just as the last guests were saying their goodbyes, and the cleanup crew was beginning to clear the tables. By morning, it would have been seen by thousands of people, shared and commented on, and dissected by strangers who knew nothing about the truth behind the image. But for this moment, there was just the two of them on a terrace overlooking the sea, trying to figure out how to move forward from a beginning, built on deception, towards something that might possibly become real. The lanterns swayed in the ocean breeze, casting shifting patterns of light and shadow across their faces. In the distance, the last notes of the evening's music faded into the sound of waves against the shore. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. Tonight, they had this: an honest conversation under a star-filled sky, and the tentative hope that sometimes the worst beginnings could lead to the best endings, if they were brave enough to try. Leila's phone buzzed at 11:47 p.m., just as she was slipping out of her heels in the quiet of her bedroom. The notification made her stomach drop before she even saw what it was: a tag from Vivian's Instagram account. The photo was worse than she'd feared. Shot from a distance, it captured her and Marcus in profile on the terrace, lantern light casting them in golden tones. To anyone scrolling past, they looked intimate, romantic, like a couple sharing secrets in the shadows. The caption made her hands shake. "When the heart wants what it wants. Charity gala, love is in the air, society, Hamptons." Within minutes, the comments started rolling in. Most were harmless enough, friends saying she looked beautiful, acquaintances asking who her mystery man was. But others made her feel sick. Speculation about Marcus's background, pointed questions about her type, and worse things that she couldn't bear to read. By the time she screenshotted the post to send to Marcus with an apology, it had already been shared dozens of times. Her bedroom door burst open without warning. Eleanor stood in the doorway, still in her evening gown, but with her hair disheveled and her usual composure cracked. "What is this?" Eleanor demanded, holding up her own phone. "What is this photo everyone's sending me?" "Mother, I can explain." "Explain what? That you've been carrying on with the help? That you've made our family the subject of gossip?" Eleanor's voice rose with each word, her carefully maintained facade crumbling. "Do you have any idea what people are saying?" "He's not the help," Lila said, finding her spine. "His name is Marcus, and he's a professional." "He's a waiter, Lila. A waiter you invited to mock in front of our friends, and now look what's happened." The words hit like a slap. "How did you—" "Vivian called me the moment that photo went live. She told me all about your little dare, about how this whole thing was supposed to be a joke." Eleanor's eyes blazed with fury. "And now it's blown up in all our faces." Lila sank onto her bed, the weight of her mistakes crushing down on her. Of course Vivian had called. Of course she'd revealed everything, probably laughing as she did it. A gentle knock interrupted the confrontation. Henry appeared in the doorway, still in his tuxedo, but moving carefully with his walking stick. "What's all the shouting about?" he asked mildly, though his eyes took in the scene with sharp intelligence. Eleanor whirled toward him. "Your daughter has made us a laughingstock. Look at this." She thrust the phone at him. Henry studied the photo for a long moment, then handed the phone back. "I see a picture of two people having a conversation. What's the problem?" "The problem," Eleanor said through gritted teeth, "is that she invited him as a joke, and now people think they're involved. The phone hasn't stopped ringing." "Then maybe," Henry said quietly, "you should stop answering it." Eleanor stared at her husband as if he'd spoken in a foreign language. "Henry, this is serious. The foundation, board, our social standing, will survive a photograph." Henry moved to sit heavily in the chair by Lila's window, his recent surgery making sudden movements difficult. "Eleanor, I've watched that young man tonight. He handled himself with more grace than half our guests. If Lila wants to spend time with him, I see no problem." "You see no problem?" Eleanor's voice cracked. "Henry, people are already calling. The Pemberton woman wants to know if we're making some kind of political statement. The hospital board is concerned about the foundation's image." "Let them be concerned," Henry said firmly. "We've given millions to that hospital, built them a whole wing. If they have a problem with our daughter's choice in companions, they can find their funding elsewhere." Lila looked at her father with tears in her eyes. Even weakened by surgery, even facing pressure from the social circle he'd navigated for decades, he was defending her. Defending them. "Dad," she whispered. "What, sweetheart?" "Thank you." Eleanor threw up her hands. "You're both impossible. Mark my words, this will not end well. People have long memories in our circle, and they don't forget scandals easily." After her mother stormed out, Lila and Henry sat in comfortable silence for a while. Outside, the catering staff was breaking down the last of the tents, their voices carrying on the night air. "I should probably tell you," Lila said finally, "that it did start as a dare. Vivian challenged me to invite him as entertainment." Henry nodded slowly. "I figured as much. But that's not why you're upset about this photo, is it?" "No." She wiped at her eyes, careful not to smudge her makeup further. "It's not." "Then the beginning doesn't matter as much as what you do next. What if he hates me? What if he thinks I planned this?" "Then you'll have to prove him wrong." Henry pushed himself up from the chair with effort. "Good night, sweetheart. Try to get some sleep." After he left, Lila stared at her phone for a long time before typing, "Marcus, I'm so sorry. I had nothing to do with the photo. Please call me when you get this." She sent it, then turned off her phone and tried to sleep. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw Marcus's face on the terrace, the moment when he'd asked what he was to her, and she hadn't been able to answer. Across town, Marcus stared at the same photo on his laptop screen. He'd seen Lila's text, but hadn't responded yet. The comments section was a mix of curiosity and cruelty that he'd expected, but still stung to read. His phone rang. Chef Arturo's name appeared on the screen. "You see the picture?" Arturo asked, without preamble. "I see it. Listen, kid, I like you, you know that. You're good people, good worker. But this..." Arturo sighed heavily. "The restaurant can't afford this kind of attention. Rich people, they get weird about this stuff. Start thinking we're trying to social climb, you know?" Marcus felt his stomach sink. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying keep your head down for a while. Let this blow over. Maybe take some vacation days, work in the kitchen instead of front of house, just until people forget." The line went quiet. Marcus understood the subtext. Stay out of sight where the wealthy customers couldn't see him, and wonder if he was the one dating their daughters or trying to work his way into their social circles. "How long?" Marcus asked. "Week? Maybe 2. Depends how fast people move on to the next scandal." After hanging up, Marcus sat in his dark living room, laptop screen casting blue light across his face. A week or 2 of lost tips, of hiding in the kitchen like he'd done something wrong. Because Vivian Hale had decided their private conversation was public entertainment. His phone buzzed with a text from Nadia. "Saw the picture. You okay?" He typed back. "Fine. Just tired. Wanna talk?" Tomorrow. Need to think. But thinking was the last thing he wanted to do. Every thought led back to the same questions. Had Lila known her friend would do this? Was the whole evening just an elaborate setup for social media content? Or was she as much a victim of Vivian's cruelty as he was? His phone buzzed again. This time, it was a number he didn't recognize. "This is James Patterson from the Society Sun. We'd like to comment on your relationship with Lila Whitmore." Marcus deleted the message without responding, then turned off his phone entirely. He'd been careful his whole adult life. Worked hard, saved money, built a reputation based on skill and professionalism. He'd never given anyone a reason to question his character or his motives. And now, because of one photo taken without permission, strangers were speculating about his life and his relationship with a woman he'd met exactly twice. The worst part was the small voice in his head wondering if Nadia had been right all along. Maybe rich white girls didn't invite black waiters to charity galas unless they wanted something. Maybe the sadness he'd seen in Lila's eyes was just good acting. But then he remembered the way she'd apologized on the terrace, the genuine regret in her voice, the way she'd tried to stop Vivian from taking the photo, the look on her face when she'd watched him help the young server, like she was seeing something in him that surprised her. Maybe she hadn't planned this. Maybe they were both victims of someone else's idea of fun. His laptop chimed with a new email notification. The sender was lilawhitmore@gmail.com, and the subject line was simple. "I'm sorry." Marcus stared at it for a long moment, cursor hovering over the delete button. Then, against his better judgment, he opened it. "Marcus, I know you probably don't want to hear from me right now, but I need you to know that I had nothing to do with that photo being taken or posted. Vivian acted on her own, and I'm furious with her. I also need you to know that everything I said on the terrace was true. This didn't start the way I wanted it to, but getting to know you has been the best part of these last few days. You're kind and thoughtful, and you have more integrity in your little finger than most people I know have in their whole bodies. If you never want to see me again, I understand. But if you're willing to give me a chance to prove that I'm not like the person who took that photo, I'd like to try. I'll understand if I don't hear back from you. Lila Marcus read the email 3 times, looking for false notes or calculated phrases. But it sounded like the woman he'd talked to on the terrace. Direct, honest, a little vulnerable. His phone rang again. This time, it was Nadia. "I thought you turned your phone off," she said when he answered. "I did, just turned it back on." "Listen, I've been thinking about what you told me Sunday. About this girl, about the gala. And I've been watching the comments on that photo." Marcus braced himself for another lecture about staying in his lane. "Some of those people are really ugly," Nadia continued. "Saying things about you that make me want to drive over there and punch them in the face. But some of them are defending you. People I've never heard of, telling the trolls to shut up. And one name keeps showing up. This Lila girl, responding to every nasty comment about you." Marcus's laptop was still open to the photo. He clicked on the comments section and scrolled down, looking for what Nadia had seen. There, dozens of responses from Lila's account. Short, firm replies to anyone who'd made assumptions about Marcus's character or motivations. She wasn't defending herself or explaining their relationship. She was defending him. He's a gentleman and a professional. You don't know him, so don't pretend you do. This is exactly the kind of behavior that makes good people avoid public events. She'd been fighting for him in comment sections while he'd been assuming the worst about her. "Marcus?" Nadia's voice pulled him back to the phone call. "Yeah, I'm here. Whatever else this girl might be, she's not letting people trash you without a fight. That means something." It did mean something. It meant she'd been up all night defending him to strangers, trying to control damage she hadn't caused. It meant she understood that words had power, and she was using hers to protect him instead of herself. "What do you think I should do?" Marcus asked. "I think," Nadia said slowly, "that you should give her a chance to prove who she really is. But on your terms. Make her work for it." After hanging up, Marcus stared at Lila's email for another long moment. Then he hit reply. "Lila, I saw what you've been doing in the comments. Thank you. I'm willing to talk, but we do this right. No more surprises, no more friends with cameras. If we're going to figure this out, we do it honestly and away from anyone who thinks our business is entertainment. Coffee tomorrow morning. That place on River Street, 9 a.m. Marcus." He sent it before he could change his mind, then closed the laptop and finally tried to sleep. Outside his window, the city hummed with late-night energy. Somewhere across town, Lila Whitmore was probably staring at her phone, waiting for a response that would tell her if she'd lost something before she'd really had a chance to find it. Tomorrow would be the first day of finding out if two people could build something real from a foundation of mistakes and misunderstandings. If trust could grow from honesty, and if kindness could triumph over cruelty. It wasn't the beginning either of them would have chosen. But sometimes the best stories started with the worst circumstances, and sometimes the strongest foundations were built on the rubble of spectacular failures. The last thing Marcus saw before sleep finally took him was Lila's name glowing on his phone screen, her latest comment defending him to someone who'd questioned his education and his family background, still fighting for him, even when she wasn't sure he'd speak to her again. Maybe that was the answer to her question on the terrace. Maybe that's what he was to her, someone worth fighting for. And maybe, if they were both brave enough and honest enough, she could become the same thing to him. The night settled around them like a promise, full of possibility and uncertainty in equal measure. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but tonight had given them something to build on. The knowledge that when it mattered, they'd chosen to protect each other instead of themselves. It was a start. The coffee shop on River Street was exactly what Marcus had hoped for. Small, unpretentious, and mostly empty at 9 in the morning on a Friday. He'd arrived early, choosing a table near the back where they could talk without being overheard or photographed by curious strangers. Lila walked in at exactly 9 o'clock, looking nothing like the polished heiress from the gala. She wore simple jeans and a soft blue sweater, her blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail. No makeup that he could see, no jewelry except small pearl earrings. She looked younger this way, and tired, like she hadn't slept much either. "Thank you for coming," she said as she slid into the seat across from him. "Thank you for fighting those trolls all night." Marcus studied her face, looking for signs of the calculating socialite Nadia had warned him about. All he saw was exhaustion and genuine regret. "I couldn't let them say those things about you. Not when none of it was true." A barista approached their table, young, pierced, with paint-stained fingers that suggested she was an art student working to pay tuition. "What can I get you folks?" "Coffee, black," Marcus said. "Latte, please," Lila added. "And whatever pastry you recommend." "Blueberry scones fresh out of the oven." "Perfect." After the barista left, they sat in awkward silence for a moment. Through the window, Marcus could see people heading to work, absorbed in their phones or rushing to catch buses. Normal Friday morning life, completely disconnected from the social media storm that had kept them both awake. "I talked to Vivian last night," Lila said finally. "After I saw what she'd done." "And?" "She laughed, said she was doing us a favor, giving us something to bond over." Lila's hands clenched on the table. "I told her we weren't friends anymore." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "That must have been a difficult conversation." "Not as difficult as I thought it would be. I think I've been looking for a reason to cut ties with her for a while." Lila looked down at her hands. "She's not a good person, and being around her was making me not a good person either." Their drinks arrived, along with a scone that smelled like summer mornings. Lila broke it in half automatically, pushing the larger piece toward Marcus. "So where do we go from here?" she asked. "That depends." Marcus wrapped his hands around his coffee mug, letting the warmth center him. "Are you ready to tell me the truth about Thursday night? All of it?" Lila took a shaky breath. "What do you want to know?" "Why you really came to the restaurant that afternoon? What you were thinking when you sent that first text? What changed between Sunday and Thursday?" For a long moment, Lila was quiet, staring out the window at the busy street. When she finally spoke, her voice was so soft, he had to lean forward to hear. "I've been lonely for so long," she said. "Not just without a boyfriend or whatever, but really, truly lonely. Like I was surrounded by people who didn't actually see me, you know? They saw the Whitmore name and the trust fund and what I could do for them, but not me." Marcus nodded, understanding that kind of loneliness better than she probably realized. "Vivian has been my closest friend since prep school, but she's mean. Really mean, in ways that I told myself were just her sense of humor. When she dared me to invite you as a joke, I knew it was cruel. But I was so desperate to fit in somewhere, to feel like I belonged even in a cruel place, that I almost went through with it." Almost. "When I got to the restaurant and saw you again, saw how you handled yourself with dignity and kindness, I couldn't do it. I couldn't be that person." She looked up at him with tears in her eyes. "But I also couldn't admit what I'd originally planned. So I tried to turn it into something real instead." Marcus leaned back in his chair, processing this. It wasn't the answer he'd wanted, some neat explanation that absolved everyone of wrongdoing. But it was honest in a way that felt genuine. "And now?" he asked. Now I know that I want to be the kind of person who deserves to know someone like you. But I also know I have to earn that right. Before Marcus could respond, his phone buzzed with a call. Chef Arturo's name appeared on the screen. Sorry, I should take this, he answered with a cautious, Hello? Marcus, where are you? You were supposed to be in early today for inventory? I thought you wanted me to take time off. Keep a low profile. That was before. Arturo's voice carried a note of surprise. You didn't see the news this morning? What news? Check your email. Local food blog did a piece about the gala. About you. Marcus looked at Lila, who was watching his face with growing concern. What kind of piece? The good kind. Hang on, let me read it. While most guests were focused on networking and being seen, one person stood out for all the right reasons. Marcus Reed, sommelier at Romano's, quietly prevented what could have been an embarrassing incident when an intoxicated guest threatened to knock over a server's tray. His graceful intervention not only saved the evening, but demonstrated the kind of professional excellence that makes dining experiences memorable for the right reasons. Marcus blinked in surprise. How did they know about that? Apparently someone filmed it. The whole thing's online now. You look like a hero, kid. Phone's been ringing all morning with people wanting reservations specifically to have you as their server. After hanging up, Marcus stared at his phone in disbelief. Someone filmed me helping that server at your gala. It went viral. Lila's eyes widened. That's wonderful. You deserve the recognition. Lila. Marcus set down his phone carefully. Did you have anything to do with this? I swear to you, I didn't. She pulled out her own phone and quickly searched for the video. Her face lit up as she watched. Oh my God, Marcus, you look amazing. So calm and professional. The video was exactly as Arturo had described, a brief clip of Marcus smoothly redirecting the drunk guest while protecting the young server. The comments were overwhelmingly positive, praising his professionalism and grace under pressure. Look at this, Lila said, scrolling through social media. People are sharing it everywhere. Real gentleman is trending. Marcus watched her face as she read, looking for any sign that this was part of some elaborate plan. But her surprise and delight seemed completely genuine. This is incredible, she continued. People are saying Romano's is lucky to have you, that more restaurants should train their staff to handle situations like this. Lila! Marcus's voice stopped her mid-sentence. You really didn't arrange this? I promise you, I had no idea anyone was filming. She showed him her phone. Look, I'm seeing this for the first time too. A new realization dawned on Marcus as he watched the video again. Wait, this happened right after you introduced me to your father, before we went to the terrace. Yes. Which means... He looked up at her with something approaching wonder. When you apologized to me on the terrace, when you said you were ashamed of how this started, you had no idea that I'd done anything worthy of praise. You were apologizing just because it was the right thing to do. Lila nodded slowly. I was apologizing because I owed you an apology. What you did for that server was amazing, but it wasn't why I felt bad about the original invitation. For the first time since the whole mess began, Marcus felt the tight knot of suspicion in his chest start to loosen. Here was proof, in her own words, recorded before she could have known about the viral video, that Lila's regret was genuine. His phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text from Nadia. Saw the video. I'm proud of you. Also, that girl of yours has been commenting supportive stuff all morning. Maybe I was wrong about her. My sister thinks I should give you a chance, Marcus said. Your sister is very protective of you. I respect that. Lila took a sip of her latte, leaving a small foam mustache that she quickly wiped away. "Can I ask you something now?" "Sure." "What do you want?" "Not from me specifically, but from life. What are your dreams?" The question caught him off guard. Most people, especially people from Lila's world, assumed they knew what someone like him wanted. More money, better opportunities, a chance to climb social ladders. But Lila was asking what he actually wanted. "I want to open my own restaurant someday," he said. "Small place, maybe 30 seats. Focus on wine pairings with simple, perfect food. Create something that makes people feel welcomed and valued, regardless of how much money they have." "That sounds wonderful. What's stopping you?" "Money, mostly. Commercial real estate, licenses, equipment. It takes more capital than I've been able to save." He shrugged. "Maybe someday." "What if someday could be sooner than you think?" Marcus studied her face carefully. "What do you mean?" "I mean, what if someone wanted to invest in a restaurant like that? As a business partner, not as charity?" "Lila." "I'm serious. I have money sitting in accounts earning practically nothing. You have the skills and the vision. Maybe we could help each other." "Is this your way of trying to make up for the invitation?" "No." Her answer was immediate and firm. "This is my way of recognizing a good investment opportunity. I've watched you work, Marcus. You're talented and professional, and you understand hospitality in a way that can't be taught. If you'll let me, I'd like to help you build something amazing." Marcus leaned back in his chair, mind racing. A partnership with Lila would solve his capital problems, but it would also complicate everything else between them. Business and personal relationships were difficult enough to navigate separately. "Can I think about it?" he asked. "Of course. But Marcus?" She reached across the table and briefly touched his hand. "Whatever we decide about business, I hope we can figure out the personal stuff too. I know I messed up the beginning, but I'd like a chance to get the rest right." The touch was brief, but it sent warmth up his arm. For the first time since the photo went viral, Marcus allowed himself to hope that maybe this could work. Maybe two people could build something real from a foundation of mistakes and misunderstandings. "One step at a time," he said. "One step at a time," she agreed. 2 months later, on a warm Sunday evening in early fall, both families gathered in the Whitmores' backyard for dinner. The formal gardens had been transformed with simple string lights and comfortable outdoor furniture. No photographers, no social media posts, just two families sharing a meal. Marcus stood at the grill, turning chicken, while Henry supervised from a nearby chair. The older man's recovery had been remarkable, and his energy was almost back to normal. "You're burning the edges," Henry observed with a grin. "No, sir. I'm creating caramelization," Marcus replied. "There's a difference." "If you say so. In my day, burnt was burnt." Nearby, Lila and Nadia worked together to set the long outdoor table, laughing over some story Nadia was telling about her son's latest adventure in kindergarten. Eleanor emerged from the kitchen carrying a homemade apple pie, something that would have been unthinkable 6 months ago when she'd never baked anything in her life. "Dessert's ready," she announced, setting the pie carefully on the side table. "Though I make no promises about how it tastes." "I'm sure it's wonderful, Mrs. Whitmore," Marcus said. "Eleanor, please, we're family now." The word hung in the air, warm and solid. Family, not chosen because of obligation or social advantage, but because of genuine affection and respect. Jalen ran through the yard chasing fireflies, his laughter mixing with the gentle sound of evening birds. Lila caught one of the glowing insects in her cupped hands and showed it to the little boy before releasing it back into the gathering dusk. Auntie Lila, did you know fireflies make their light with magic? Jalen asked solemnly. Is that so? Lila replied with equal seriousness. What kind of magic? The good kind, the kind that makes everything prettier. Marcus watched the exchange with a smile. Over the past 2 months, he'd watched Lila transform from the polished but empty socialite into someone genuine and warm. She'd kept her promise to earn the right to know him, showing up consistently, honestly, and without fanfare to prove who she really was. Their restaurant plans were moving forward slowly but steadily. They'd found a space, signed papers, started the long process of permits and renovation. More importantly, they'd learned to work together, to trust each other's judgment and respect each other's expertise. Dinner's ready, Marcus called, carrying the platter of perfectly grilled chicken to the table. As they gathered around the table, Henry raised his glass of wine, a bottle Marcus had selected from his own collection. To family, Henry said simply. To the people who make our lives better just by being in them. To family, everyone echoed. Under the string lights, surrounded by the people they'd learned to love, Marcus and Lila exchanged a look that held 2 months of hard work, honest conversation, and growing trust. It hadn't been easy. There had been awkward moments, difficult conversations, and the occasional relapse into old patterns. But they'd done the work. They'd chosen truth over image, authenticity over comfort, and real connection over superficial charm. As the evening wound down and the families began to clean up, Marcus found himself alone with Lila on the same terrace where everything had changed that night in July. Penny for your thoughts, she said, joining him at the stone railing. Just thinking about that night, how different everything is now. Good different or complicated different? Good different. Really good different. He turned to face her, taking her hands in his. I love you, Lila. I love you too. Her smile was radiant in the soft light from the house. Thank you for giving us a chance. Thank you for proving we deserved one. They kissed then, soft and unhurried, with the sound of their families laughing in the background and fireflies dancing around them like tiny stars. It was nothing like that first viral photo that had caused so much trouble. This was private, real, earned through months of choosing each other again and again. In the distance, they could hear Jalen asking Eleanor if she knew any stories about dragons, and Eleanor's delighted laugh as she admitted she might know 1 or 2. Henry was helping Nadia load dishes onto a tray, the two of them discussing recipes and comparing notes on Marcus's stubbornness. It was ordinary and magical all at once, the kind of moment that didn't need to be captured or shared or validated by strangers. It simply was, perfect in its quiet simplicity. Ready to go inside? Lila asked eventually. In a minute. Marcus pulled her close, breathing in the scent of her shampoo and the evening air. I want to remember this exactly as it is. She settled against his chest, both of them looking out over the water, where moonlight painted silver paths across the gentle waves. Behind them, the house glowed with warm light and the comfortable sounds of family. They'd built something real from the rubble of a cruel dare, something lasting from a moment of weakness, something beautiful from the ugliness of social media gossip and casual cruelty. It hadn't been easy, and it hadn't been fast, but it had been worth every difficult conversation, every moment of doubt, every choice to be vulnerable instead of guarded. The fireflies danced around them like blessings, their magic light making everything prettier, just as Jalen had said. In the distance, a church bell chimed 10 o'clock, marking the end of another perfect day in a life that neither of them had dared to imagine just months before. Hand in hand, they walked back toward the house, toward their family, toward a future that stretched ahead of them bright with possibility. The string lights swayed gently in the evening breeze, casting dancing shadows across the stone terrace where it had all began. Behind them, the ocean whispered against the shore, keeping its ancient promise that after every storm, there would be calm. After every ending, a new beginning. After every heartbreak, the possibility of love. They were home.